Hey guys, thanks for coming back. Hello, and welcome back to part 2 of the Gabe Brown interview on Farming Without the Bank. Let me know if you have questions, comments, concerns. Send them my way, maryjo@withoutthebank.com. When you plant, now this is a stupid question from somebody that does not farm, aka me, but when you are growing corn or wheat or whatever, you see it, you come up, it's all corn, there's nothing else in it. But if I'm going to plant a cover crop and then I'm going to come over the top of that with corn or wheat, is that cover crop going to get harvested in with that corn, that I'm not going to have clean corn?
Yep. And realize you have to do this in context. Okay. One of the benefits we have here in the Northern Plains, we get something called winter. Winter will kill about anything up here, right?
Even me.
Well, see, I plant the cover crops the year before. That cycles the energy. Winter kills and terminates that. Now we will graze ours with livestock. You may or may not have livestock. But that thatch layer, 2 to 3 inches of residue, that's what inhibits weeds from growing the following year spring. So I no-till, plant my corn into that. I don't have to spray a herbicide. The nutrients that are in that thatch layer break down via biology, and it's a slow-release fertilizer to the corn. So that's what you used your context to your advantage. Okay?
Now, so we don't have dirty
south,
corn.
Pardon me?
So we don't have dirty corn. It's clean.
Yeah, if that's what you want. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yep. Now, if you're down south, they don't have the advantage of winter. What they'll do down there, they'll plant an early cover crop. They will roll that cover crop down with what's known as a roller crimper, and that roller crimper will terminate the cover. Or they'll spray a herbicide to terminate the cover and plant their corn into that residue. So it all depends where you're located.
That's why we've seen in videos that they have the roller. Yep. We didn't know what the roller was for.
Yep.
All right. So I sound like a complete idiot to everybody that is listening that knows everything about regenerative agriculture, but I don't know. So I can ask stupid questions because I'm learning, right? And these are the people some of the people listening don't have that education. So.
Well, and let me explain this. So roller crimper. So way back in about 2009, I had a roller crimper fabricated and made and bought it, tried it for 5 years. It did not work. And the reason being, in order for a roller crimper to work, that cover crop has to be starting to form a seed head. It has to be in the reproductive phase. It has to be pollinating. Well, by the time rye, for instance, cereal rye, got to that stage, it was the earliest I could ever roll was the 12th of June. Well, that doesn't leave me enough time to get a cash crop to maturity before our frost. So I tried it for 5 years and I sold it. That's why I moved to growing covers the fall before. See? And people might say, well, I can't grow covers because I'm only growing corn and soybeans. That's the reason I explained you may have to diversify the crop rotation. But you could certainly add peas, which are harvested very early, which give you plenty of time to grow a cover crop following them. So you may just have to diversify your crop rotation.
So that you can get the cover crop in there before it freezes.
Yep. The problem we have in agriculture today, we're not short of nutrients except for carbon. We've release too much carbon into the atmosphere. We don't have enough in the soil to feed biology. So let's have a little soil lesson here. So soil is, for every 1 part of nitrogen in the soil, there's 11 parts of carbon. So if a farmer goes and applies synthetic nitrogen, for every pound they apply, that biology is going to readily consume that, but they got to go find carbon to balance their carbon needs, right? Well, where are they going to get it all? They're going to eat the organic matter in the soil. They're going to eat your residue first and the dying, decaying roots, and then the organic matter. That's why the soils we farm today are but a mere fraction of the organic matter they once were. I contend with the people we work with, about 75% of the carbon that was once in the soil is now in the atmosphere. It's gone. We have very, very degraded resource. And I don't care. All over the world, you see the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Iowa brags about their soils being so rich and healthy, but you look, organic matter levels are only 3 to 4%. Well, they were once 12 to 14%. They're about a mere fraction of what they once were. Look at the Red River Valley in North Dakota. We get a half an inch of rainfall and it's flooding everywhere. We don't have aggregates, and then we don't have the carbon in the soil to hold that moisture. It's ridiculous.
So instead they're tiling.
Yeah.
So let's take a situation like that if we've got tiling going on or it is too wet, how long does it take us to get that soil where it needs to be that we can alleviate the water issue and not have to tile?
Yep. And I use my own farm as an example. In 1991, when my wife and I bought this farm from her parents, Jay Fear, who was the district conservationist for NRCS, came out to my farm and he did infiltration studies. He found that on our cropland, because my father-in-law, he practiced what I called recreational tillage. He would go till just for recreation. He just loved to till. We could only infiltrate a half of an inch of rainfall per hour. Well, there's oftentimes we'll get more than the half of an inch in an hour, okay? The problem was that tillage destroyed the soil structure. It destroyed the aggregates. Think of it this way. When the county goes to build a new road, what's the first thing they do? They go disc it all up, right? To destroy the structure, collapse it so they have a firm foundation to lay down the asphalt, right? Well, what are we doing with tillage? We're doing the same thing. We're destroying it, and then we wonder why it can't infiltrate water. So now, after 25 plus years of regenerative practices, I had a team of scientists here for 3 years. We spent $170,000 studying the soils on just 600 of my acres here. And what they found is now, using very sophisticated equipment, dual head infiltrometers, we can infiltrate 30 inches of water in an hour. Okay? Bismarck, North Dakota has never received 30 inches of moisture in a year, let alone in an hour. So the only place on my farm where you're going to have water running off is on my roads. That's it. See, I tell people, if you think you need tile drainage, go look in the mirror. There's the problem. The problem is you and your management. It's not the soil. You've destroyed the soil. I often thought years ago for my retirement, I was going to go down somewhere in the Red River Valley, right along one of the interstates, I-29 or so, buy a quarter of land just to show people how easy this is. Yet instead they go till, and then they got to put in all this tile drainage, which is just ridiculous. And then we wonder why we have flooding issues in the Red River Valley. Interestingly enough, the state Department of, it was Climate and Environment or so, just interviewed me because they heard me talking about how ridiculous this is, that we need, farmers think they need all this tile drainage. If they would change their management, they wouldn't need that. Either that or they have such tax problems, they need the write-offs, one or the other.
And I think that, again, I think it comes back to, it's not going to work fast enough.
Okay.
So how much, if I don't put the tile in and I do regenerative things,
mm-hmm.
I still might flood out for 2-3 years before it starts working. Is that a legitimate concern?
We can significantly change infiltration in 1 year. If we have a good growing season and a very diverse cover crop, we can improve it. Now, you didn't destroy it in a year. We're not going to be able to heal it totally in a year. Right. But look at the cost of tile drainage. And then look at the ramifications to society, everyone else, from flooding downstream. Look at the nutrients that are being lost in those tile drains, because you're not holding the nutrients. The nitrogen's going downstream, some of the phosphorus going downstream, etc. What's that worth to you? You know, it's a proven fact that nutrients applied, only about 40% of them are taken up by the plants in the year they're applied. So what are you doing with the other 60 plus percent? Are they washing down that tile drainage? Of course. So my answer to that is no, you have to start down the regenerative path. For one thing, immediately we can start holding those nutrients on your land. You paid for them. Why do you want to flush them downstream? Right. And then we can start building the aggregates, improving the water infiltration immediately. Normally, by the end of year 3, you're seeing major, major improvements. Okay. Now, interestingly enough, one of the issues we're having here now with the price of soybeans where they're at, there's many people who are planting soybeans on soybeans. You plant any legume too often, carbon nitrogen ratios, you're going to destroy the infiltration rates. It's your management that's causing that.
You know, it's so funny when I talk to people, and it's the same thing with what I do for life insurance. Oh, Mary Jo, it's not going to work, right? And so it won't work for us. And
Mm-hmm.
you talk to people on the western side of the state or anybody with clay gumbo soil, and they're like,
Mm-hmm.
we can't do it. It's clay and gumbo. If we had Gabe soil, it would be easier. Then you talk to the people with lots of water. Well, if we had Gabe soil,
Mm-hmm.
it would be easier. And then
Yep.
you talk to the people in New Mexico or in desert country, because I have clients all over, and they're like, oh, it doesn't work. We're too dry here.
Mm.
And and I can just say, like, I don't know a whole lot about soil, but we just took our soil samples this week. Scott and I went out, and let me tell you, we don't have like this super rich soil everybody thinks that we have. We have sand, we have clay. We tried to plant trees. It
Mm-hmm.
was almost impossible to dig a hole in spots.
Yep.
So I don't, it's, I don't, there's misconception that Gabe has the best, apparently you have the best 500 acres of soil in the country, Gabe.
Well, and I tell people this, do you think that my father-in-law, who dissed incessantly, left me that soil that I have now? No. And, you know, Gabe, some people call me an arrogant, you know what, I don't care. But for those people who think it can't be done on their place, bet me your land against my land. I'll bet you my land against yours, I can get it to work on your place. All soil is sand, silt, and clay, and various proportions thereof. Okay? We all have sand, silt, and clay. Some places, as you said, more clay, some places more sand. We can do it anywhere. We've done
Mm-hmm.
it on beach sand in Florida. We've done it in heavy gumbo clay. It doesn't matter. New Mexico, look at one of our consultants, Alejandro Carrillo, lives in the Chihuahuan Desert of Mexico. I'll never forget. I've been on his ranch. It's absolutely amazing. You drive through 200 miles of desert with where it takes 300 acres to run a cow a year. And then all of a sudden you start getting closer within a few miles of Alejandro's. You start seeing birds and everything. You literally open the gate onto Alejandro's ranch, and within minutes you're in 5 to 6 foot tall grass. And I'll never forget when he did a presentation and he said, well, we normally get about 8 inches of moisture a year, but I really don't need that much. And it takes him 30 acres to run a cow calf pair per year. The neighbor 300 and him 30. Okay. Tell Alejandro that you don't get enough moisture.
Yep.
You know, look at
And the,
last year. Last year on our ranch, we had 5.6 inches of rain. The year before was 6.2. Okay. I still combined a crop last year. Wasn't a bumper crop, but none of my neighbors were combining crops last year. They were taking crop insurance.
Mhm.
I don't take crop
I was
insurance.
going to ask you, I don't know where your land is. So people, it's funny because people are like, oh, how are Gabe's crops? I'm like, I don't even know where Gabe's land is. I have no idea how Gabe's crops are. But
Mm-hmm.
people were asking me last year, well, how is Gabe's stuff? How is Gabe's stuff? So let's talk about it. If you
Yep.
have more to add to that, I would love for you to add to it, because we were
Yep.
severe drought last year. I mean, anybody, and you know the neighbors, but I mean, they were sickle mowing corn
Yeah.
because there was
Yeah.
nothing there. They
Yeah.
couldn't. There was nothing for silage.
Yeah. That's right. And we combined one of our polyculture cash crops is we grow barley, oats, peas, and flax together, and we combine that together, and that's feed that goes into our hog and poultry rations. And we were able to combine that. It wasn't a bumper crop. We did about 45 bushels an acre, but in a drought with zero inputs beside the seed, that's pretty profitable, right? And I didn't
Mm-hmm.
have, we don't take part in any government program, so I don't take part in crop insurance or that. But we were combining when nobody else was, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
and yeah, the cattle grazed on your land, and we haven't had to destock any livestock after these. We've been 6 years in a row now below normal precip. Even this year, we're well below normal again, but we haven't had to destock anything. We're still running the same numbers, which, by the way, on a per acre basis is about 4 times the livestock that any per acre that any of our neighbors run.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of says it all.
Yeah. So let's talk about crop insurance, because you've mentioned it a couple of times, and that was the one question I had from a client to ask you. And I think it's a pretty important question. How, she said, okay, we can get away from all the other programs, but that one is really, really hard. How
Mm-hmm.
do you suggest somebody transition out of that?
Yeah, and I do not suggest they transition out of it. That's a
Okay.
moral, to me, that's more of a moral and ethical issue. Okay. And our clients still take crop insurance. If you're borrowing money, now I know they could go your route. Okay. I'll say
We
that.
still borrow. We
Yep.
still borrow money at
Yep.
farming without the bank.
Yeah. We don't borrow money on this ranch. We haven't borrowed money in years. Okay. So um, we're going to recommend our clients, they need to, they should stay in there because of their aversion to risk. You know, we're not going to do anything to put and jeopardize their assets. Okay. So you can go down the regenerative path and still take part in crop insurance. Okay.
But what if I don't? Because Gabe, you and I very much sit on the same page as far
Mm-hmm.
as taking government money.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, if you have to do it, then I am not judging you for it, but I am not going to get a loan at a bank if I don't have to. I am not
Mm-hmm.
going to take PPP money. Like, I didn't
Yep.
take any of that stuff. But what if how do I transition out? Because I don't
Mm-hmm.
want to be there, but I
Yeah.
kind of have to be there. So if I
Yeah.
want to transition out, how do I do that?
Yeah. And you do that by healing yourself financially. I tell people I took advantage of a lot of those programs, Equip, CSP. It helped with infrastructure on my farm. But when I started becoming very profitable, why should I take those? Why not leave them for someone who truly needs them? It's like the PPP program. That just burned me when I saw people who are well heeled, don't need it, yet there they were with their hand out. Okay,
Yep.
that's our children and grandchildren's future that you're taking. What gives you the right to do that? Morally, ethically, I couldn't do that myself. I'll let others, I'm not going to judge others. That's their decision to make.
Yeah.
But my son's 34 years old. He's been farming now for 12 years. He's never taken any government payments. Not many people can say that. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And he's also 34 years old and not borrowing money. He operates on cash. Not many farmers and ranchers who are 34 can say that either, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact of the matter is, how do you get to that point? For one, you got to treat your farm and ranch like a business. It absolutely blows my mind. I work with clients from tomato growers to cattlemen to wheat growers to, every commodity out there. It absolutely amazes me how few farmers and ranchers really know their costs of production. Farmers and ranchers are very good at growing and raising things, but they're terrible business people by and large. You know,
Mm-hmm.
you
Yep.
go to my son. Yeah.
I ask them to have their numbers ready, Gabe. They get
Yeah.
an email from me that says, I need your numbers. And they come to the meeting and they don't have their numbers.
Yeah.
I'm like, I can't help you with your finances and we can't get you out of the banking system without your numbers. And so, like, when I started the whole farming without the bank thing, I thought the banker was the bad guy. And I'm like, oh, they're out there screwing the farmers, right? And in all reality, it's just like a divorce. There's two sides to every story.
Mm-hmm.
And the other side is when you come to me with the banker's numbers that he put together for you, that tells me that banker can't trust because
Exactly.
you're allowing him to run your business.
Most farmers and ranchers, their financial statement is a Schedule F. That's it. They've never done any more to that.
Yeah.
My son could walk into a lending institution if he so chose and show them the records as to the profitability on a per acre basis going back. How many days each acre was grazed by what species of livestock, how many pounds of gain was taken off each acre. He's going to get a loan, no problem, right?
Mm-hmm.
But he's well prepared if he so chose. Most
Yep.
farmers and ranchers, not that way at all.
They don't. And when I talk about on social media, when I talk about running it like a business, I get yelled at by some people because it's a lifestyle. Well, if I said, you know what, this whole infinite banking concept that I teach, that's just a lifestyle. So if I'm not making money, you should still trust me. We don't walk into Shields or into any other store and say, oh, good for you, you lost money. That is not a badge of honor. That just means we're not keeping track of our finances. And
exactly. And most farmers and ranchers brag about not paying taxes. Okay, Gabe Brown pays a lot of taxes. And you know what? It doesn't bother me because that means I made money, right?
Yep.
I mean, what's wrong with that?
That's exactly right. We should be happy. I'm not happy to pay them. I will pay them because I made money and I'm happy that I made money. Now, if they used my money more appropriately, I would be ecstatic to pay those taxes.
That's where I have an issue. But let's talk about that a minute. Use the money appropriately. Okay, here approximately 3 weeks ago, you'll remember we had some major winds for about 3 days in a row. Well, the soil was moving, okay? I mean, we lost a lot of topsoil.
We could not see Gabe's house when we drove by. It was awful.
But it wasn't blowing off my property, though.
No, it was blowing. I actually texted Paul and I'm like, hey, you guys are getting some free ground.
Yeah. But this is a true story. It just so happens that if any of your listeners have watched the movie Kiss the Ground, okay, we've been filming a sequel, somewhat like a sequel to Kiss the Ground. It'll be released in about a year. And it's called Common Ground. And it's how we have to come together as a society and find common ground for common good. Well, it just so happened that the production crew was going to be at my ranch. And I said, perfect timing. Okay. We went over to my neighbor's. My neighbor had a half a section of corn there last year, chopped it for silage. They dissed it this spring several times, planted soybeans, and then rolled it. Well, it was powder fine. Now, think of it this way. If you hold up a sheet of paper, the thickness of that sheet of paper is the equivalent of 1 ton of topsoil per acre. They literally lost over 2 inches of topsoil. We filmed, they have 250 acres that is bare. They lost all the soybeans. It blew them right out of the ground. They were about 3 inches tall at that time, just completely took them away. I have 30 inches of their soil in my pastures now. Okay, plus how much blew further east. Now, I stood on camera and this probably will make the movie, but I said, you talk about a fleecing of America. The United States taxpayer is going to pay that farmer through revenue insurance for his loss, even though it was 100%, well, 99%, the wind had something to do with it, due to his management. If he would have planted a cereal rye crop there last fall and no-tilled those soybeans into that cereal rye, he would have had much better water infiltration, soil structure, all that, but he would have lost zero topsoil. So the American taxpayer is paying for that. You don't think that's fleecing of America? That should not be
And
allowed.
and we actually talked about that because we've seen that field and there's nothing growing there.
Nothing.
I will totally back you up 100%. And we drive by and we're like, what happened there? And I
Yep.
said, do you think that the wind
Yep.
just completely destroyed? I did not realize that.
Come into my
It was,
pastures, and we almost got stuck with a 4-wheel drive pickup. The soil is that deep that blew off there. That farmer, you should not be allowed to get those payments from that because it was your mismanagement that caused that. I'm speaking to that particular farmer. Okay, but we see that over and over again. And yet then you hear some of these farmers, well, woe is me, woe is me. No, go look in the mirror, educate yourself, do the right thing for once,
we need to start questioning our practices of everything. And
Yeah.
I did a TikTok about this the other day because I said, we are speaking out of both sides of our mouths as farmers, and we say, don't farm, it's too hard, you can't make any money. And then we're losing farmers and nobody wants to come back. What are we doing? We have the practices of, if we're not making money farming, how are we managing that money? I see the money side of it. How are we managing that money? How are we managing the practices? We need to start questioning, how are we estate planning? The whole picture needs to be addressed because there's not just one piece that is missing. It's an equation of things that are missing and to keep this farming industry alive.
Yep.
And people just want to easily say, well, it's this or it's that. Well, how do we change it? Stop saying we can't and start asking how.
Exactly. Let me give this point to illustrate what you just said. So when my son was in high school, there was approximately 50 kids in the FFA chapter, and the majority of them were from farms and ranches. Today, our son is the only one of those, of his classmates, who are farming and ranching. And I say, shame on those parents. Shame on those parents for not making it conducive for those children to come back. Because there's some that wanted to, but they just could not financially do it. Now, I'm not saying you have to hand it to them. When Paul came back to the ranch, I made him bring enterprises with. He had to add value because I wasn't just going to write him a check. So he had to add value, start enterprises. They had to be profitable or he wasn't going to make a living. But you have to teach your children business, and then you need to be astute business people yourself, astute enough to show that there is profitability in farming and ranching. And I tell you, there is, and there's profitability without having to take it from the government. Well, from the American taxpayer, to be specific.
Well, and I think we have a lot. And I wanted to talk to you about this too, because I know that you've done a really good job of saying, hey, I'm handing this over to Paul. And you talk about it all the time, and everything that anybody that interviews you, Paul is now running the operation. So there's so many young people that don't get that opportunity to run the operation. And some of it makes me, some people should not have the opportunity to run it, but some of them, mom and dad are controlling it so badly, and mom and dad raised them. So you should know if your kids should be able to take over or not. And if you don't think that they can take over, it might be something you did. Like it might be, you may want to look at your teaching lessons. But can you address a little bit about how that transition went, because I think you have a daughter as well, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and you talk about your estate plan.
Yep.
So you talk about your estate plan in your book. So can you talk about how you address that, how you guys set some of that up? Because I just want to be clear, you are not clients of mine. So I don't know, and you don't have to divulge it all, but so many people don't want to talk about it. And then we have family issues. So what is your advice? What did you guys do?
Yeah, and that all come about through, I tell people, Gabe's not very smart. I just had to learn a lot of lessons the hard way. Well, one of the lessons that my wife and I learned, her parents actually asked us to come back and take over the farm. And I jumped at the chance. My wife will tell you she married a city kid to get away from the farm, but I drug her back. Anyway, we spent 8 years farming alongside her parents, thinking that we'd have the opportunity to buy the ranch. Then one day they called their 3 daughters in and said, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to sell each daughter a third of the ranch. Now, fortunately, we were able to buy the home place with the farmstead. But essentially what that meant is because we had to rent the rest and the rents more than covered the land payments, we really bought the whole farm, but got a third of it. Well, Shelley and I, that was a lesson learned. We said, we're not going to do that to our children. If one of them want to farm, we're going to set it up differently. If they both want to farm, we'll set it up, make it conducive to both of them. So what we did is, before Paul was even out of college, we knew he was going to come back to the farm. We said, we're going to put all the land in a living trust. And so Shelley and I have access to any income from the land as long as one or both of us are alive, or until we pass that on, okay, which we have the right to do. And so we made Paul both the executor of the trust and the beneficiary of the trust. So he knew right away when he come back that if he worked hard, the land will be his because it's in a trust. We don't own it anymore. The trust does. And he knew that he would get that. Then what we did for our daughter, we took out life insurance policies. She's the beneficiary of those life insurance policies, and she gets any personal estate we have remaining. In other words, cash, or if there's a house off the farm, whatever the case may be. Now, is it equal? No. Is it fair? Absolutely, because Paul spent his adult life working to make this farm better. And our daughter understands. She understands fully and is fully fine with it. I see over and over again, as you said, Mary Jo, these parents. I was just down on a farm in Minnesota here 2 weeks ago. The parents are in their upper 70s. The child who's stayed on the farm is in his 50s. And there's no plan, no estate. He's been working all this time, 30 plus years. He's ran that farm without knowing if he's going to get it or not. And he has siblings. That's ridiculous. That's shame on those parents. And I did have a talk with them. They admitted they have to do something. But that just shouldn't be.
Then do it. We know we have to do something. We have to do it because it's not something that it's causing family tension. It's breaking up families. It's breaking up farms by not planning. Here's what I tell all my clients. By not planning, you're going to have to sell. The land is going to have to get sold to pay for probate. Yep. So you work your butt off hard all day, every day for what? Because you're not protecting it. Yep. So protect it, put it in a trust, buy your life insurance, whatever. Gabe, just make sure you have whole life, not universal or variable. I'm just going to say. Make sure it's whole life for her. Okay, let me see if I know I have some other questions. Here's a good one. I have my own answer to this question, but it's your podcast. So at what point do you think somebody should be, if we're just starting from scratch, at what point should I be owning my land and owning my equipment?
Oh, that's a great question. So here's what I say to that, and realize for 20 plus years we ran an internship program. We had 2 or 3 young people on the farm every summer, and they're enamored with owning land. They think that they just got to run out and buy land. One of the lessons that I really tried to teach them was, why would you do that? First, you don't even know, you're too young. You didn't even know where you want to farm. You don't even know what you want to do, whether it's crops, livestock, etc. What I really encourage them to do is follow their first. You got to run it like a business. So, what is there a market for? What can I produce at a price point that I can make a reasonable profit, etc. Then you start accumulating cash. Okay, you grow that business, you grow your clientele, and as new opportunities arise, there will be chances for you to rent land. Okay, you may rent it for a little while. That might not be the right place. Pretty soon down the road, you're going to have cash accumulated. You're going to have equity that you can buy a place that you can make your home. Too many people, though, they become burdened, way overburdened with those interest payments, etc. Why would you want to do that? The other thing I really tried to impose on our interns is, everybody's enamored with cows. I want to be a cowboy. Well, cows are about the poorest return in agriculture, next to some of the iron that people buy, or tile drainage, and I had to get that one in there. But yeah, well, you look at from a livestock enterprise standpoint, the most profitable livestock on our farm is broiler chickens, followed by laying hens, followed by pigs, then sheep. Cattle, well, honey is up there also. Cattle is the least profitable because you have way too much invested, way too long of a time frame before you get a return.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I encourage people to rent. If you can buy it, great. But please don't buy land and have a cattle note at the same time. I don't like cattle notes at all, and I have no reason to hate them, except every single client I see that has a cattle note and a land note, they go backwards, because when cattle prices drop, they can't make the cattle note and the land note at the same time. So custom graze, and that was another question that somebody had for you, is how do we find people to custom graze our cover crops? How do we find people to custom graze on our land?
Yeah, and that's a great question. And one of the things we did back when I was on the Burleigh County Soil Conservation District Board of Directors is we tried to marry up, so to speak, the farmers with the livestock producers. And we did that for a number of years, and it worked really well. Yeah, you need to reach out in your community, start taking a few ads out. What we did that worked really well is we designed a program where the um, farmer would supply the equipment. They would seed the cover crop. The uh, livestock owner would pay for the cover crop seed and bring the livestock on, manage, fence, water around that cropland field, whatever. But the cropland owner got to determine how much residue was left, because most livestock owners are going to graze all they can, and that residue is an important factor for the grain farmer. So you have to work together, but boy, that works well. And there may be an additional payment beside from the livestock producer to the farmer, but that's fine. They're both getting, it's a win-win situation.
Yeah, I have wondered that the same. If the Why wouldn't the farmer be planting those cover crops? Because our our cattle producers need food, and especially last year when we had such a huge drought,
Mm-hmm.
would have, I don't know that the cover crops would have came up necessarily, but if it could
No.
have provided a little bit of food for the cattlemen, great, because we all are eating beef.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yep.
did you have something to add to
I
my
have to tell you this story. Oh
Okay.
man. So one thing about me, I'm just going to come right out and say it, and I'll call people out if need be. It doesn't bother me. But I'll never forget back in the 2011, 2012 drought. I was really preaching that, hey, we need to educate farmers, ranchers, go down the regenerative path, build resiliency. And I'll never forget a certain government official told me, oh, Gabe, you can't kick them when they're down. We can't talk about that. And I'm like, you have to talk now because we're going to get another drought and they won't be ready for it. Okay, last year, it's July. You know how hot and dry we were. Nothing. I had grazed off a fall biennial cereal rye, winter triticale, hairy vetch crop. I had grazed that with livestock. I immediately went back in and seeded a warm season cover crop mix, sorghum, Sudan gas, millet, cowpeas, etc. I was literally in the tractor seeding. This same government official was on the radio saying, and they were asking him in an interview, well, what can ranchers do? Well, he says, ideally you'd maybe seed a cover crop, but there's nobody that'd be doing that now. As I'm out there seeding and I'm screaming into the phone, you idiot, I told you 10 years ago this had happened. I seeded that cover crop, okay? Somehow it germinated, and it was because of the amount of residue I had in the soil. And it grew about 2 inches tall, and it just stayed there. But it didn't die. It just stayed there. Okay, at about 2 inches tall. Well, if you remember, late August, we caught a little shower of rain. It grew about 6 inches. Early September, we got another inch. It grew 2 feet tall. Think of all that was doing, cycling solar energy, feeding the biology, and I had some grazing for the livestock. Okay, so if I would have listened to that certain government official, but fact of the matter is you have to start now. You have to prepare now. There's a million excuses. Henry Ford said, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're correct. Well, you got to look in the mirror and realize it's up to you. Your farm, your ranch is a direct reflection of you. You got too much clay, too much sand? Build some soil aggregates, okay? That's up to you, nobody else.
Thank you guys for being here. You know the drill. If you have comments, concerns, questions, let me know. MaryJo@withoutthebank.com. If you have not gotten my book, Farming Without the Bank, what are you waiting for? I am not going to bite. You do read, because if you didn't read, you probably would not have found me. So definitely go to farmingwithoutthebank.com, grab the book, and be on the lookout. If you are in the Cody, Wyoming area, I am going to be in Cody. So be on the lookout for tickets, because you can go to farmingwithoutthebank.com/events and you will be able to get your ticket for Cody there. It's a $25 ticket. It is not expensive. I just want to be able to cover a rental of a room. That is it. So please make sure that you get your tickets. We will be there September 14th, and it will be an evening presentation. I'm just not sure where we are having it yet, because we are still looking for a location. So make sure, if you want to you want to see me live and you are around the Cody area, that you get your ticket. All right, guys, thanks, and you have a fantastic rest of your day.